Daniel Hawthorne was the kind of man people pointed at when he entered a room, his name synonymous with wealth, power, and prestige. His tall frame and sharp suits made him appear larger than life, and his reputation as a ruthless but brilliant businessman had earned him both admiration and fear. His face was a regular fixture in glossy magazines, not just for his corporate triumphs but for the enviable life he shared with his wife. Clara, glowing with the radiance of pregnancy, was photographed often at his side, dressed in elegant gowns, smiling politely at cameras as flashbulbs captured the illusion of perfection. Together, they were hailed as a power couple, the sort who dined at exclusive restaurants, graced charity galas with their presence, and were whispered about at society gatherings as if they belonged to a world just beyond everyone else's reach. To the public eye, Clara had everything a woman could want: wealth, security, status, and a husband adored by the business press. Strangers saw her as lucky, the picture of grace and privilege. Yet behind the sparkle of jewels and the veneer of flawless photographs, Clara carried a heaviness that no one noticed. Her smile often felt rehearsed, her laughter timed, her presence beside Daniel more symbolic than genuine. She was celebrated as the perfect wife, yet inside she felt invisible, reduced to nothing more than an accessory to her husband's towering image. Every gala, every dinner, every carefully staged appearance reminded her of how small her own voice had become in the grand theater of Daniel's ambitions. Pregnancy had deepened that loneliness. While she longed for intimacy, reassurance, and warmth during this vulnerable time, Daniel had grown more distant. He was attentive when cameras flashed, his arm looped protectively around her, but in the quiet of their home his attention wandered. Clara often sat in their vast, echoing penthouse staring at the skyline, wondering when her marriage had shifted from love into spectacle. She remembered a time when Daniel's eyes softened at the sight of her, when his touch carried tenderness. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, buried beneath layers of pride and appearances. Unknown to her, Daniel's heart had already begun drifting. It wasn't merely work or the pressures of success that kept him away, it was the intoxicating allure of someone new. Sabrina, young, bold, and dazzling, had slipped into his life like fire into dry wood. She whispered promises of excitement, freedom, and passion, stroking his ego with every word. To Daniel, Sabrina was not just a mistress but a reflection of his own vanity, a living reminder that he was powerful enough to have it all. Her presence fed his arrogance, convincing him that he deserved more than the quiet devotion of his wife, that he had outgrown the simplicity of loyalty. As Clara adjusted her necklace in the mirror before yet another gala night, her mind heavy with unspoken fears, she could not have known that the fragile facade of her life was on the brink of collapse. For all the glitter and grandeur surrounding her, appearances, so carefully crafted and admired, could shatter in a single, unforgiving moment. Sabrina Laurent was the kind of woman who thrived in the glow of attention. She had learned early that beauty could open doors faster than hard work ever could, and she wielded it like a weapon sharpened by ambition. Her dark hair tumbled in perfect waves, her lips painted in shades that spoke of danger and seduction, and her gaze lingered just long enough to trap men into forgetting their wives, their promises, their sense of reason. Sabrina was not content with scraps. She craved the whole feast: luxury handbags, glittering jewels, and the thrill of being adored by a man who could provide it all. To her, Daniel Hawthorne was not merely a lover, he was a golden ticket into a world of excess she believed she deserved. Their affair had begun in whispers and stolen glances, but quickly escalated into late-night meetings in sleek hotels and secret trips Daniel disguised as business. Sabrina's hunger for luxury fed into Daniel's pride, and he found himself promising her things no one else could have. Most recently, she had her eye on a rare diamond necklace displayed in one of the most prestigious jewelry stores in the city. It sparkled with an icy brilliance that seemed to mirror her own ambition. "That necklace belongs on me," she told him one night, her head resting on his chest, her tone soft but edged with demand. Daniel, drunk on her attention and the illusion of youth she brought back into his life, promised he would get it for her. He did not think of Clara, who was carrying his child at home. He only thought of Sabrina's approving smile, the way her eyes lit up when she received what she wanted. Clara, however, was not blind. Though Daniel's excuses were polished, his absences grew harder to conceal. The dinners that stretched late into the night, the unexplained withdrawals from their accounts, the faint traces of perfume on his suits that were not hers, all of it gnawed at her in silence. She wanted to believe that her husband's distance was merely stress from work, that she was imagining the storm gathering around her. Yet the knot in her chest tightened with each unanswered question, each evening she spent alone in their sprawling apartment while he chased shadows. In the quiet moments before bed, Clara's thoughts became her greatest tormentors. Was she paranoid, overly sensitive because of her pregnancy? Or was the truth far darker? Was her husband giving his love to another woman while she carried his child? The uncertainty hollowed her out, leaving her torn between confrontation and silence. A part of her feared asking, because the answer might destroy what little was left of her peace. But another part screamed that she had a right to know, that her marriage was crumbling before her very eyes. Meanwhile, Sabrina was growing impatient. She had no interest in remaining a secret forever. To her, Daniel's wife was nothing but an obstacle, a fading figure whose usefulness was almost gone. One evening, when Daniel slipped away to see her, she pressed him harder than ever before. Draped in silk and lounging with a glass of wine, she fixed him with a piercing look. "You can't keep living two lives, Daniel," she said, her voice low but sharp. "I will not be second to her. I want that necklace, I want your name, and I want your world. Choose me over her, or you'll lose me." Her ultimatum echoed in his ears long after she spoke. Daniel, for all his arrogance, felt a flicker of unease. He had built his reputation on control, but with Sabrina's demands and Clara's growing suspicions, control was slipping from his grasp. The illusion of perfection he had worked so hard to maintain was beginning to crack, and in the shadows where Sabrina thrived, danger waited for the moment it would all come crashing down. Clara sat across from Daniel at the long dining table, the golden light from the chandelier glinting off the polished silverware. The meal before her had gone cold, untouched, while Daniel scrolled absently through his phone, replying to messages with a faint smile she hadn't seen directed at her in months. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her fork. The silence between them felt suffocating, and she could no longer bear it. "Daniel," she began softly, her voice carrying the weight of weeks of bottled pain, "you've been so distant. You come home late, you barely speak to me anymore. It feels like I don't exist to you." He didn't look up immediately, as if the glowing screen in his hand held more value than her presence. Finally, with a sigh, he set the phone aside and leaned back in his chair. "Clara, you're overthinking again. I've been swamped with work. You know how demanding the business is right now." But the excuse rang hollow, the same one she had heard too many times. Her eyes stung, tears threatening to spill, but she forced herself to keep speaking. "I'm carrying your child, Daniel. This should be the happiest time of our lives. Instead, I feel alone. Like you've already left me, even while you're sitting here." Her words pierced the quiet, but Daniel hardened against them. He hated these conversations, the way they made him feel cornered, judged. "Clara, you don't understand. I'm doing this for us. For our future. The deals I'm closing, the projects I'm managing, they're what keep this lifestyle alive. Would you rather I fail? Would you rather we lose everything?" She shook her head slowly. "I'd rather have you. Just you. The man I married. The one who used to look at me as if I mattered." For a flicker of a moment, guilt tugged at him, but pride quickly overpowered it. In his mind, he justified the distance. He told himself Clara was too consumed by her pregnancy, too bound to the mundane routines of domestic life, to understand what he needed. He deserved freedom, a taste of excitement, the spark that came with Sabrina's daring laughter and demanding affection. Was it really so wrong, he thought, to want more than the quiet devotion of a wife who no longer thrilled him? Clara watched him withdraw into silence again, his eyes already drifting toward the phone he had abandoned. A chill settled over her. The man across from her was a stranger, his heart elsewhere, his promises nothing but echoes of a past she longed to relive. She pressed her palm protectively over her growing belly, whispering a vow to herself that if she had to face this storm alone, she would. And yet, deep inside, she felt a shadow looming over her marriage, a premonition of something terrible drawing near. She could not name it, could not see it clearly, but every instinct in her told her that the life she thought she had was unraveling thread by fragile thread. Clara had spent the morning arranging flowers in the apartment, trying to lift the heavy atmosphere that had settled between them. She had rehearsed her suggestion several times before finally speaking. "Daniel," she said, a tentative smile on her face, "why don't we go out today? Just the two of us. Maybe look at some jewelry, something for the baby, or even just for us." Daniel paused, a frown creasing his forehead. He had other plans, he told himself. Meetings, calls, things he could not ignore. But Clara's hopeful eyes, the gentle curve of her belly under her dress, and perhaps a trace of guilt made him relent. "Fine," he said finally, his tone clipped but obedient. "We'll go. Just don't expect me to spend the entire day wandering around." The drive to the jewelry store was quiet, the hum of the car engine filling the uncomfortable space between them. Clara tried to spark small conversation, mentioning the nursery, the baby name she liked, even a story about a co-worker's newborn, but Daniel's responses were monosyllabic, his eyes flicking frequently to his phone, to the rearview mirror, to the bustling city streets outside. Clara felt the tension coiling around them, a subtle but persistent pressure that made her stomach churn with unease. When they arrived at the jewelry store, the opulence inside was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished display cases, each containing glittering necklaces, bracelets, and rings. Clara's eyes sparkled as she moved from case to case, imagining a delicate bracelet for the baby or a simple necklace to commemorate the pregnancy. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe they could have a normal day, one where their love and excitement for the new life mingled with the beauty surrounding them. Daniel, however, was not sharing in her wonder. His gaze kept drifting to one particular display, where a necklace lay under soft lighting, its diamonds catching the light in a way that made it seem almost alive. Clara noticed it, a pang of curiosity in her chest. She asked casually, "That one's beautiful, isn't it?" But Daniel's eyes didn't meet hers. Instead, they lingered, calculating and intent, as if the necklace held some unspoken significance. The salesman, a sharply dressed man with an air of polished confidence, approached Daniel with a practiced smile. "Sir, this is the piece you reserved," he said smoothly. Clara's brows furrowed, a slow, creeping suspicion wrapping around her chest. She had never seen Daniel reserve jewelry like this for her. "Reserved?" she repeated, her voice soft but sharp, trying to mask the sudden unease she felt. Daniel's jaw tightened, a subtle flicker of irritation crossing his face. He wasn't accustomed to secrets slipping in plain sight, and the salesman's words felt like a crack in the carefully constructed world he had built. "Yes, reserved," he said curtly, brushing past her gaze and gesturing vaguely toward another display. Clara's eyes lingered on the necklace, the tension in the store thickening around her as her mind raced. Who was it for? Why would he reserve something and not tell her? She forced herself to smile, attempting to maintain the calm exterior expected of a wife in public, but inside, doubts festered. Daniel's irritation was subtle, but undeniable. The way he avoided her eyes, the way he shifted uncomfortably under the salesman's polite attention, it all spoke volumes. Clara felt the first icy tendrils of a realization, one she wasn't ready to fully grasp. The perfect facade of her life, the image of a happy, united family, was starting to crumble in small, almost imperceptible ways. Clara's hand hovered over the glass display, her fingers trembling slightly as she tried to steady her voice. "Daniel," she said, keeping it low but firm, "what is that necklace? Why did you reserve it and not tell me?" Her eyes searched his face for an answer, for a hint that he might finally be honest, but all she found was tension tightening his jaw and a flicker of irritation in his eyes. It's nothing," he muttered, his words clipped and evasive, failing to soothe the knot in her chest. Her voice rose a notch, a mixture of fear and frustration spilling out. "Nothing? You reserved it for someone else, didn't you? How long have you been hiding this from me?" The display's glittering diamonds reflected the anger and disbelief in her eyes, a mirror of the storm brewing inside. Daniel's pulse quickened. The facade of control he had maintained for months, carefully managing his image, began to crumble under Clara's piercing questions. Panic surged in him, a volatile mix of guilt, fear, and rage, making his movements jerky and uncalculated. "You don't understand," he snapped, his voice louder now, sharp enough to draw the attention of nearby customers. I can't explain everything." The words were more defensive than explanatory, a shield against the emotional reckoning he knew was coming. Clara's brows knitted together, her voice trembling but determined. "Daniel, I'm pregnant. I deserve the truth. I deserve respect." The plea struck him like a physical blow, stirring an anger he could neither contain nor rationalize. Without thinking, driven by a surge of panic and frustration, Daniel shoved Clara. The motion was swift and shocking, a violent eruption of suppressed tension. Clara stumbled backward, her hands instinctively clutching her stomach as she fell to the marble floor. Gasps erupted from every corner of the store. A woman screamed, a child cried, and the faint hum of jewelry cases clinking was drowned out by the murmurs of alarmed customers. Phones were already raised, recording the unfolding disaster. The scene spiraled instantly from a tense argument to a public spectacle of fear and violence. Clara's eyes widened in shock and pain, the fear of what could happen to her unborn child flooding her senses. The metallic scent of panic mixed with the faint perfume from display cases, and her body tensed as she tried to steady herself on the cold marble. "Daniel! What are you doing?" she stammered, voice shaking, each word punctuated by the sting of betrayal and the ache of her fall. The store staff froze for a moment, unsure how to intervene, until the jewelry store owner himself appeared from behind the counter. Mr. Leclerc was a tall, imposing man with a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. His eyes widened in horror at the sight of a pregnant woman on the floor, and a man seething with unchecked anger. "Sir," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Step away from her." Daniel hesitated, his chest heaving, as the weight of the moment finally began to press down on him. Mr. Leclerc moved quickly, placing himself between Daniel and Clara, guiding her gently to a safer position. The crowd murmured and shuffled, some whispering about calling the police, others filming the scene with their phones. Clara, still clutching her stomach, looked up at Daniel with a mixture of fear, betrayal, and disbelief. The man she had trusted, the one whose image she had once revered, had transformed in an instant into a source of danger. Daniel's hands shook as he backed away slightly, and the full reality of his actions began to hit him. The public scrutiny, the potential consequences, and the undeniable proof that his private life was no longer hidden. All around them, chaos buzzed, and for Clara, the illusion of safety and love had shattered irreparably, leaving only the raw, painful truth of what her life had become. Mr. Leclerc's face was a study in controlled outrage as he guided Clara to a chair behind the counter, gently placing a hand on her shoulder to steady her. The store, once a sanctuary of sparkle and elegance, now felt like a courtroom, its walls echoing with gasps, whispers, and the low murmur of customers recording every detail on their phones. Leclerc's eyes never left Daniel, whose chest rose and fell with a mixture of anger and disbelief, as if he could not comprehend that his wealth and influence might not shield him from the consequences of his actions. "I will not allow this," Leclerc said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. "A pregnant woman has been assaulted in my store. This is not a matter for private negotiation or intimidation. The authorities will handle it." His tone left no room for argument, his words deliberate and unwavering. Daniel's jaw tightened, and he straightened his posture, attempting to summon the aura of power that had always commanded respect in boardrooms and social circles. "Do you know who I am?" Daniel demanded, his voice laced with the arrogance of someone accustomed to doors opening at his name. "I could make this situation disappear with a single call. Do you understand the position you're putting yourself in?" Leclerc's expression did not falter. He leaned slightly closer, his voice calm but resolute, every word deliberate. "And do you know what I just saw?" he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Do you know what it means to assault a pregnant woman in public, to endanger her life and humiliate her in front of others? That is what I saw, Mr. Hawthorne, and that is why the police will be coming." Daniel's face flushed with a combination of fury and panic. His carefully curated life of power, control, and fearsome respect had never faced such a direct, immovable obstacle. For a moment, the veneer of superiority cracked, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in a way he had not experienced in years. He stammered, searching for words, for some way to regain control of the situation, but the authority in Leclerc's eyes left him powerless. Clara, still clutching her stomach, felt the weight of humiliation and betrayal pressing down on her. The image of the husband she had loved, the man she had trusted to protect her and their child, was collapsing before her very eyes. She could not ignore the reality any longer. Daniel's cruelty was no longer subtle, no longer something that could be explained away as stress or distraction. It was raw, public, and undeniable. The shock of seeing a man she had believed devoted to her become violent in a matter of seconds left her reeling. As Leclerc pulled out his phone to call the police, his fingers steady despite the storm around him, Clara's mind raced. The world she had thought was safe, her marriage, her home, the life she had imagined for her child, was gone in an instant. All that remained was the bitter clarity of truth. Daniel Hawthorne, her husband, was not the man she had believed him to be. He was capable of real cruelty, and she had been blind to it until now. The store hummed with tension, the murmurs of onlookers blending with the faint ring of Leclerc's phone as he spoke to the authorities. Clara's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as she held onto the chair, trying to steady herself. She had survived the fall, physically intact, but the psychological blow, seeing the truth laid bare, was far more jarring. In the middle of that sparkling jewelry store, surrounded by luxury and witnesses, the illusion of her life had been shattered completely. The wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the tense murmurs of the jewelry store as police cars pulled up outside. Officers in crisp uniforms entered briskly, their presence commanding immediate attention. Mr. Leclerc stepped forward, gesturing toward Clara and Daniel, explaining the situation with a calm, measured tone. "A woman was assaulted here," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos, "and I have evidence of intent and deception that must be documented." Officers immediately separated witnesses, asking each to recount what they had seen. The customers who had captured the incident on their phones provided their statements, some still holding their devices, the glow of screens illuminating their wide-eyed shock. Clara sat quietly, clutching her stomach, the adrenaline from the fall mingling with the growing dread of what would come next. She watched Daniel pacing nervously, attempting to regain control, his tailored suit now feeling like a costume for a role he could no longer play convincingly. Mr. Leclerc approached one of the officers and handed over a neatly folded envelope. "Inside, you'll find the receipt for a necklace reserved and purchased by Mr. Hawthorne," he explained. "It was meant as a gift, but not for his wife." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The officer opened the envelope and examined the receipt, nodding before glancing at Daniel with a professional but unmistakable stare. Clara's eyes, wide with disbelief, followed the officer's movements. The store seemed to hold its breath as Mr. Leclerc added, "Sir, do you wish to explain this reservation?" His gaze locked onto Daniel, leaving no space to hide. The necklace, a flawless cascade of diamonds, had been reserved weeks earlier, well before the tension of the past days had become apparent. The name on the receipt was unmistakable, Sabrina Lauron. A murmur rippled through the crowd of onlookers. Whispers grew louder, phones were raised higher, and a low hum of disbelief filled the store. People exchanged glances, pointing subtly at Daniel, the polished businessman whose carefully curated life was now unraveling in real time. Every eye seemed to weigh him, to measure the gap between the man who walked in confidently and the one now shrinking under the weight of exposure. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the pieces fell into place. The perfume she had smelled on his suits, the late nights, the sudden interest in extravagant items not meant for her, all converged into one undeniable truth. Daniel had lied, deceived her, and carried on an affair while she carried his child. The receipt in the hands of Mr. Leclerc was proof she had long suspected but could not confirm. Seeing it now, as tangible as the diamonds themselves, her chest tightened with a mixture of rage, sorrow, and betrayal. Daniel's mask of respectability began to fracture. He opened his mouth, attempting some feeble explanation, but the words faltered, caught between panic and anger. He tried to regain composure, adjusting his tie, straightening his posture, but it was too late. The store, the witnesses, the officers, all had seen the truth laid bare. The image of the untouchable, suave millionaire dissolved under the weight of his actions, leaving a man exposed, vulnerable, and morally bankrupt. Clara's eyes met his for the first time that day with unwavering clarity. There was no love there, no apology sufficient to repair the damage. Only the bitter reality that the man she had trusted completely was capable of deception, cruelty, and betrayal. Around them, the world continued to hum with the chatter of witnesses and officers, but for Clara, the store had transformed into a theater of revelation. The glittering diamonds no longer symbolized wealth or luxury. They were the centerpiece of truth, illuminating every lie Daniel had tried to hide. By the time Daniel and Clara had left the jewelry store, the incident had already ignited a firestorm across social media. Within minutes, videos captured by stunned onlookers were circulating online, showing Daniel's hands pushing Clara and the immediate aftermath, her clutching her stomach, the horror etched on her face, and Mr. Leclerc stepping in with authority. Hashtags began trending, framing Daniel as a violent and unfaithful husband, while news outlets scrambled to confirm the story. Headlines flashed relentlessly: "Millionaire assaults pregnant wife in public," "Betrayal and violence in the city's elite circles," "Jewelry store incident reveals infidelity scandal." Clara sat quietly at home, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her phone. The images, the videos, the commentary, it was overwhelming, but also strangely vindicating. For years, she had been dismissed as a background figure in Daniel's life, her concerns minimized, her presence ignored. Now the world was seeing the truth, and she was no longer invisible. The outrage of strangers, their sympathy and disbelief, echoed the emotions she had been forced to bottle for months. Each new notification brought a wave of validation mixed with the raw sting of humiliation. Daniel, meanwhile, was panicking. His private life, carefully guarded and meticulously curated, was now public property. Calls from business partners, investors, and friends began flooding in, each demanding explanations. He tried to issue statements, to control the narrative, but the viral nature of the videos rendered him powerless. The image of the untouchable, composed millionaire was crumbling, replaced by footage of a man unmasked, angry, violent, and morally compromised. Sabrina, too, was caught in the storm. Initially, she tried to distance herself, deleting social media posts, calling acquaintances to claim she had no involvement, and attempting to vanish from public scrutiny. But investigative journalists and online sleuths quickly traced the receipt, the reserved necklace, and other subtle evidence linking her to Daniel's deceit. Her name became entwined with the scandal, her reputation tainted by association, even as she attempted to avoid the glare of publicity. The world now saw not only Daniel's betrayal but also the presence of a woman who had fueled it, breaking the secrecy she had relied upon. Amid the chaos, Clara found herself both shaken and strengthened. The humiliation of being pushed in public, of seeing her private life exposed, was tempered by the overwhelming support she received. Messages of sympathy poured in from strangers who had watched the footage and felt her pain. Friends and acquaintances reached out, offering condolences and support. Social media became a forum where people rallied behind her, calling out Daniel's actions and celebrating her strength in enduring such cruelty. For the first time in months, Clara felt empowered by the very exposure she had feared. The incident had destroyed the illusion of control Daniel had maintained over his life and over Clara, but it had also cast her in a new light. Someone who had survived betrayal, humiliation, and fear, and who was beginning to emerge stronger. In the eye of the media storm, she realized that the world's judgment, while unforgiving, was finally aligned with the truth she had long known. Daniel Hawthorne was not the man she had believed him to be, and the life she had imagined with him had ended the moment he revealed his true nature. Clara waited in the quiet of their penthouse, the city lights casting long shadows across the marble floors. The room, once a sanctuary of opulence and warmth, felt hollow now, echoing with the remnants of the day's chaos. When Daniel finally arrived, his steps hesitant and defensive, Clara didn't move. She stood by the window, hands folded over her belly, her gaze fixed on the skyline as if drawing strength from its vastness. "Clara," Daniel began, his voice softer than usual, betraying a flicker of uncertainty. He approached cautiously, trying to bridge the distance he had created, but Clara turned to face him, her expression hard, unyielding. "Don't Clara me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling undercurrent. "Do you have any idea what you've done today? Do you even understand what it means to betray me, to put our child in danger, to humiliate me in front of everyone?" Daniel's eyes darted away, guilt flashing for a moment before he replaced it with anger. I didn't mean to," he stammered, the words halting and ineffective. "I was frustrated, stressed. You don't understand the pressures I'm under." Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Pressures? Pressures don't justify violence. Pressures don't justify lying to your wife, sneaking around, flaunting your deceit with that woman. You think stress excuses cruelty, Daniel." Her words hung in the air, slicing through the remnants of his self-assurance. I'm sorry," Daniel said, but it came out hollow, almost rehearsed. He shifted from foot to foot, his usual confidence eroded by the undeniable truth of the public exposure. "I never wanted to hurt you. Clara, you have to believe me." But Clara shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "Believe you? After everything? After today? After the receipts? After the lies and the arrogance and the danger you put me in? No, Daniel. I cannot believe you anymore. Not after what I've seen. Not after what everyone else has seen." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You've shown your true self, and it's not the man I married. It's not the father I want for my child. I will never allow my baby to grow up with a father like you. Never." Daniel's face paled as her words sank in. The carefully built empire of influence, reputation, and control he had relied on suddenly felt fragile, meaningless in the face of loss he could not reverse. He opened his mouth, looking for an explanation, an apology, a way to reclaim what was slipping away, but found only emptiness staring back at him from Clara's unwavering gaze. I can fix this," he muttered, desperation creeping in, though even he knew the words rang hollow. "I can." "You can't," Clara interrupted, her voice cold, final. "You can't undo what you've done. The world has seen it. I have seen it. And my child will never know you as the man you pretend to be. I will protect my baby from your cruelty, Daniel. That is the only thing I can do now." Daniel slumped into a chair, finally confronting the weight of his actions. He had lost Clara, the love he had taken for granted, and with her, the carefully curated image of perfection he had spent years building. The public humiliation, the undeniable evidence of infidelity, and the realization that he could not manipulate this situation left him exposed and powerless. For the first time, the millionaire who had controlled everything around him felt utterly defeated, stripped of his pride and forced to face a truth he had long ignored. Some losses could never be repaired. Clara, standing tall despite the turmoil within her, watched him with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. She had reclaimed her dignity, her power, and the future of her child. And Daniel, cornered by his own mistakes, could only watch as the life he had once dominated slipped irreversibly from his grasp. The following weeks were merciless for Daniel Hawthorne. The police investigation moved quickly, fueled by the overwhelming evidence collected at the jewelry store, witness statements, videos, and the receipt that confirmed his infidelity. Charges of assault and public misconduct were filed, and Daniel's lawyers scrambled to contain the growing scandal, but the momentum of public outrage was unstoppable. News outlets reported every detail, highlighting the danger Clara had faced as a pregnant woman and the moral failings of a man whose wealth had once insulated him from accountability. The golden veneer of Daniel's life was rapidly tarnishing under the harsh light of truth. Investors began to pull out of his ventures, reluctant to associate themselves with a figure now synonymous with violence and deceit. Board members resigned, partnerships dissolved, and business associates distanced themselves, fearing the reputational damage. The empire Daniel had painstakingly built, a symbol of power and control, began to crumble around him. With each phone call denied and each contract terminated, the realization dawned: wealth and influence could not protect him from the consequences of his own actions. His reputation, once untouchable, was irreparably damaged, and the illusion of invincibility he had maintained for decades lay in ruins. Meanwhile, Clara found herself navigating a different kind of challenge, rebuilding her life from the ashes of betrayal. The public, once captivated by Daniel's charisma and status, now rallied behind her. Messages of support, invitations from advocacy groups, and even offers of professional assistance poured in, acknowledging her courage in confronting such abuse. She drew strength not only from the sympathy of others but also from a growing well of resilience within herself. Each day, she took steps to reclaim autonomy over her life, arranging prenatal care, meeting with legal counsel, and planning a future unbound by the toxicity that had shadowed her marriage. Clara's decisions were deliberate, a testament to her determination to ensure a safe and nurturing environment for her child. She cut ties with Daniel entirely, redirecting her energy toward what mattered most: her health, her child, and the life she would forge independently. The penthouse that once symbolized luxury and control now became a space of refuge and quiet strength, a place where she could nurture herself and her unborn child without fear or manipulation. On a crisp morning, Clara stepped onto the balcony, the city stretching endlessly below her. She cradled her belly, feeling the rhythmic movements of her child, a reminder of life, hope, and renewal. With each step she took away from the remnants of her marriage, she felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by a sense of liberation and clarity. Behind her lay the ruins of a life defined by deception, but ahead stretched the promise of honesty, love, and resilience. Betrayal had indeed destroyed a carefully constructed empire, but truth had set the broken free. Clara's journey, marked by pain and courage, became a testament to the strength of those who refused to remain victims of deceit. In the face of cruelty and public scandal, she had reclaimed her dignity and embraced a future defined not by the failures of others but by her own unwavering will to survive and thrive.